Welcome to Quiet Light's monthly webinar series. I am joined today by Raab and Elaine Eason, and we are talking about 6 things buyers love in an e-commerce business. And we'll probably talk about more than 6 things, so it's going to be a good bonus for all of you today. What you're going to walk away with, we're going to talk about categories and niches that buyers are really excited about and what makes some more desirable than others, how the role of patents and trademarks play into your sale, the impact of untapped growth opportunities in your business and what that means, how buyers see those, and so much more. So as I said, if you were here during our intro, if you have any questions on any of that or really anything at all, you can put those into the Q&A chat box right at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we will be answering those throughout the hour. A quick intro on Quiet Light, in case you're not familiar with who we are. We help entrepreneurs buy, build, and sell online businesses for 6, 7, and 8 figures. A lot of what we do is educational. So webinars just like this. We've got a weekly podcast that comes out. We have blog posts that come out every week on our website. We've got tons of video content on our YouTube channel, free guides you can download. There's really no limit. So if you're looking for more content after this hour, you can head over to quietlight.com or again, our YouTube channel, and you can check out tons of resources there. And the other thing I want to mention about Quiet Light is that we are entrepreneur-led, meaning all of our advisors have bought, built, and or sold a business, an online business of their own. So we are very uniquely qualified to have this conversation. Everyone's been in your shoes, and we're really proud of that. Okay, enough about Quiet Light. Let's get to our 2 guests today. So first, welcome to Raab. Amanda is a very highly experienced entrepreneur and, as I mentioned, a Quiet Light advisor. She was first introduced to Quiet Light because she was looking to buy and in the market for something to add to her portfolio. In 2003, she started purepearls.com, which led her to being featured in, I'm going to read these so I don't miss any, Time Magazine, Houston Business Journal, InStyle, Modern Luxury, WWD, and more. In 2005, she launched 5 businesses in the publishing industry that turned them into multi-million-dollar businesses. And today she continues to start websites, buy businesses, and sell from her own portfolio. She is based outside of Austin, Texas with her husband and 2 kids. And when she is not doing entrepreneurial things or advising other entrepreneurs, she is traveling. As she said, she works to travel, which is the dream. So welcome, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Sam.
And we're also joined by Elaine Eason, again, another seasoned entrepreneur and a Quiet Light advisor. She holds an undergraduate degree in business and has a corporate background as a data analyst. In 2009, she started her first profitable e-commerce business on Etsy. And since then, she has built 3 more businesses, including a content site, an online subscription site, and a multi-million-dollar e-commerce brand. So a nice variety for us to dive into today. Her background includes experience on a wide range of topics from product sourcing domestically and overseas, drop shipping, inventory management, all sorts of marketing, lots of things we can talk about. And her recent exit was in the health and fitness space and was brokered by our very own Jason, who is also an advisor at Quiet Light. And she is based in Orlando, Florida, and enjoys rock climbing and aerial arts when she is not doing her entrepreneurial venture. So welcome, Elaine.
Thank you, Sam. Happy to be here.
Okay, we'll just start really quickly with I know I just gave you guys an intro, but maybe you can speak a little bit just how you got into the entrepreneurial space, in the world of buying and selling businesses. So Amanda, we'll start with you if you want to give us a little background on that.
Sure. I'm actually from, I was raised with parents who are serial entrepreneurs. And so, I had a little bit of experience with what that looks like. And when I was in undergrad, I actually learned about e-commerce, and it just seemed like such a great path to build a business and sell things online, right? Like services or products. And I was learning about e-commerce and how to market product. And then when I was in my master's program for speech language pathology, I actually decided to go ahead and pursue my dream of building this business on the side while I was pursuing my master's. And the timing was interesting because it was just as e-commerce was really growing, right? Like people were actually starting to buy things online and be comfortable with it. And when I started my first business in 2003, with SEO and just marketing, I was using a PR firm to help me market. Things just took off so quickly that within the first year, I had to choose my path. Like, was speech pathology or my entrepreneurial career. So I actually chose to pursue the path of serial entrepreneurism, and if that's a word, and that the rest is history. And so I actually loved it so much that I started rinsing and repeating that model of building businesses and maintaining them. And then I started selling them, and I saw that as a new opportunity. And then it evolved to me signing on with Quiet Light as an M&A advisor as well.
That's amazing. And Elaine, if you want to give us a quick intro as well, and then we'll dive into our topics for today.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I first started dabbling in e-commerce around 12 years ago. I made an Etsy store importing, selling kind of craft products. And from there, I went and studied entrepreneurship in college. That's really what I knew I wanted to do. I've always been the kind of person that's a little bit independent minded, kind of wanted to be my own boss. So I took that as a path to learn, but didn't really have any kind of business ideas out of college. So I worked for a little while as a data analyst, working in healthcare for a few years, but I still had that itch. So I dabbled in several different types of online business models, including the content sites, subscription service, and my ecom business that I sold with Quiet Light. So that's how I got here. I joined last year as an M&A advisor as well.
Nice. Well, welcome. We're so excited to have you both. And another plug, if you have any questions, you can start to enter those in the Q&A chat box at any point, including right now. But I'll start us off with a question to get everyone going. So you guys have both, it just sounds like from your own experience, and I'm sure from leading other entrepreneurs through this process, have seen quite a variety of categories and trends in terms of product niches, et cetera. So do you see an area that buyers are more excited about? Are there niches that seem to be more desirable or more highly valued? Maybe Elaine, if you can kick that off, and then I'll let you guys take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. This is a topic that comes up for people just getting into e-commerce, but also sellers come to me and say, "Hey, Elaine, I want to grow my business. Like, what direction do I go?" It's like you can sell so many products within an existing category, or maybe they're trying to expand to a new category. And it's something that I don't think gets talked about enough is what is the impact of your niche on the sellability of your business? And it's actually really big. So there are niches that draw a lot more interest than others. Things that are buildable. Is it a category that you can expand to a lot of different categories? Is there a lot of different markets that are interested in that? Something that you can build on is really important. Something that people have a passion for tends to be popular, though it also tends to be more competitive, things like outdoors and hobbies. Things that have like high repeat purchase rates, consumables, collectibles, those tend to be really popular as well. But sometimes what's even more helpful is to think about what niches are more challenging. Things like clothing, fashion, anything kind of trendy, anything that has like a high amount of SKUs, like jewelry, those are harder to sell. Same things with anything that's controversial, like smoking, vaping, anything kind of sexual in nature. There's just segments of the buyers that don't want to touch that. I don't know if you have additional thoughts there, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with everything that you said, Elaine. I think that, and that also can evolve over time, right? So like, you'll see certain niches that were popular that are no longer as popular as, just the general market expands, and especially with, online marketability. But I think, like Elaine pointed out, like brandability matters. And so how brandable are the products and how scalable is that niche? Consumables obviously are highly scalable products because you have the repeat customers and recurring revenue. Anything in the SaaS service space is going to be really attractive to buyers, generally speaking. Obviously, there's always the gray areas that are going to be less attractive to buyers, right? So anything that falls into those pockets of gray area typically aren't as attractive, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a buyer for that space, right? So like, there are little pockets where, buyers actually are really motivated in certain niches. And so, that doesn't limit you to just specific niches. And I like to always tell new buyers who are coming into the market, like, keep an open mind. Don't just pigeonhole yourself into certain niches, because you never know what will pop up, right? There might be a niche that you didn't even think about before, but it might actually check all your boxes for, brandability, the lifestyle component, flexibility, scalability, recurring revenue, all the things that buyers are looking for. It just really depends. I wouldn't say that there is any black and white to that, but there's certainly areas where buyers are like, I'm not so sure about that niche. So,
yeah, and I don't know if you have any specific examples you can share, and if you can't, that's totally fine. Of sellers who have come to you and you've had to make or you recommended tweaks or adjustments to their business that to sort of account for some of these issues. Maybe issues is the wrong word, but to make them a little bit more desirable.
Sure. I actually am working with a seller right now where their space is, and not to give away their brand, but they are in the CBD hemp space, right? And so that's considered more gray, right? There's just restrictions and regulations around that type of product. And they have contracts with their suppliers that are 3 years and they're exclusive, but I recommended that they negotiate those contracts for a longer period of time to provide more security to a buyer, because that one supplier is the owner of that patented product, but they do have exclusive rights to that. So that longevity of that contract is really important. So that's one thing that I recommended that they work on. We also talked about diversifying their customer portfolio. So like they're getting most of their traffic from Amazon, right? So they were just at the beginning of starting the B2B side and the wholesale side. So they're starting to expand on that and branch out in that aspect so that they're not 100% reliant on just Amazon, because Amazon does throw out new restrictions all the time, especially in this particular space, because it is a restricted area. So things like that are really important. Also, looking at negotiating their product pricing, right? So, to increase those margins, I think that's an important thing. And so far they've successfully done all three. So we're working towards, timing to market as well, as they continue to scale and grow, because, they're growing and, the market is changing. And so as that evolves, we're looking at, what can they continue to add to strengthen the brand and the foundation for the space. But also at the same time, we want to make sure that we're hitting the market at a time that maximizes their overall exit.
That's great. Elaine, if you have any examples too, I don't want to cut you off from that, but we'd love to hear. And if not, no worries.
Yeah, I don't have anything that's particularly standing out in my mind. A lot of times it's really like, what direction should I go? It's like, focus on this. This might be perceived as something that's more risky or difficult to transfer. But Amanda's really hit it in the head in terms of like, hey, these things are changing all the time. So, and we try and get buyers to keep them in mind as well, because there can be opportunities sometimes in things that are not popular. Popularity is definitely not an indicator of something being a good opportunity or not.
Yeah. And I like that you had mentioned, or you both kind of touched on that it's not necessarily, it has to be like your passion project or something like that. It's come up in past webinars as well. Like what might be a really good business for you is not your favorite thing in the world. And that's okay.
Absolutely. I think to that point, I like to just kind of drill into that a little bit, just because it's not a passion product doesn't mean it's not a passion business, right? So the model might be your passion. So for example, I had a business that was a passion business, my Pearl company, but my second company that I really grew and scaled was in the printing industry and the financial printing of products like checks and business cards and things like that, right? That's not very exciting. But the model was amazing because it allowed me a ton of flexibility and scaling and recurring revenue, all the things that you would want in a business. And so, while the products might not be your passion or interest, maybe the model is, and maybe it's highly scalable.
That's great. And so important for people to keep in mind. And you've kind of mentioned this a couple times in the past few minutes. So it's a good segue in terms of patents, trademarks, and having that proprietary aspect to your business. How important is it? Is it something people should think about really early on or closer to when you sell? How should people be thinking about those types of aspects of their business? And Elaine, if you want to kick that off.
Yeah, super important. That's a really huge boost to sellability and your valuation if you have something that is unique to you and has some kind of defensibility behind it. So I'd say that trademarks are becoming fairly, I don't want to say like expected, but if you want a buildable brand, having a trademark is really important. But having a patent or something that is truly unique, that sets you apart from competition, you have some kind of moat around that really takes you to the next level. So patent is something that it's almost like a buzzword, but of course the devil is still in the details there. If you have something that protects your product in a way that your competitors can't knock you off, and something that really makes you stand out from your competition, that is going to boost your valuation and draw a lot of interest. Of course, not everything is created equal. You can have a patent that really doesn't provide that much protection. So the devil is in the details there, but by and large, that is something that helps. And same thing with something like a proprietary formulation, or even like an exclusive contract with a manufacturer of a product, kind of like Amanda's example. If you have something that is unique to you, that a buyer, like your competition can't very easily replicate, that's going to be a really big help.
For sure. And Amanda, if you have anything to add to that, I would welcome it. Otherwise, we also have a question that we'll get to in a second from a viewer. But I didn't want to cut off this topic too soon.
The thing I would add to that is, in thinking about patents and trademarks, why does it add value? And the reason why, obviously, Elaine mentioned defensibility is a huge portion of that, but also brandability is so important. So you're building a brand and brand reputation and uniqueness around these products or services. And what you're really wanting to do is get that direct traffic, right? You don't want traffic that's constantly churning necessarily. I mean, I think it's inevitable for most businesses, but you're also wanting to build a customer base that recognizes your brand for a unique reason. And they know that that product is something that, perhaps only you provide that level of quality, or that type of product, or whatever it may be, that is that product that they're selling. And so I think that's really important, because when you think about like what's driving the traffic to your business, there's so many different ways that you can get traffic, but obviously to increase value, direct traffic is going to be such an important component. It says a lot about the product quality, the brand of the business, and the reputation, the history, how well has the business scaled over the past several years. Specifically, the last 3 years is really important. So, capturing that audience via patents and trademarks and things that are unique to that business certainly increases that direct traffic.
That's great. We have a question from a viewer, so I'll read that off now. Have buyers historically cared about the same things, or are they starting to focus on other areas of online businesses in the past year or 2 years? So if either one of you, if you want to jump into that, it sounds like, have buyers evolved is really, I think, what the question is saying, or is it tried and true, like this is what buyers care about when they're looking at an online business to invest in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's consistent principles in any business fundamental, what are buyers looking for? I think that there remain consistent things like longevity of the business going forward, sustainability, basically. You're going to be looking for how the trendiness of the products, right? So like, is this something that has to be reinvented every year, like fashion or anything that would fall into that category? Those are usually less attractive to buyers. How scalable and what are the opportunities for growth in this area? Those are all attractive things that buyers will continue to look for. I would say that there's certainly different platforms that buyers may look at as we evolve. For example, when I first started out, SEO was really huge. So search engine optimization with Google, Yahoo, Bing back in the day. And that was something that buyers looked for, strong traffic on organic search. And then that evolved to, software as a service and brandability. And then Amazon came about as a really strong platform. And so that's still evolving as well. So we see little trends in that nature.
Yeah, it's like the foundations, like Amanda said, is key. It's like, are the opportunities to grow there? And like what makes a business valuable is the same, but what that looks like does shift depending on what's happening in the market. Like, for instance, the iOS 14 updates last summer, that had a huge impact on the sellability of businesses that had a big % of traffic from Facebook and Instagram ads. So those types of businesses are harder to sell now. They sell at lower multiples. If you have a good chunk of your traffic, say 30% or more, coming from Facebook, Instagram ads, that can be harder because it's perceived as being more risky. And if you look at the history of Amazon businesses, those were harder to sell 5 years ago, whereas the advent of all these new aggregators have made those really trendy and has increased the demand. So certain things do change and ebb and flow over time, but if you have a business that has, that defensibility, that has solid relationships in place and opportunities to grow, like that's still the same. It just, what that actually looks like changes depending on what's happening in the e-com and online business world.
Yeah, and you've mentioned, since we've been talking about sort of metrics and things, are there certain areas that buyers care the most about? Like obviously profitability, all of that is exciting, but are there, from a performance perspective, if I'm a seller, like what are the metrics I should be really focused on that buyers might dive into and say, these trends are not good enough, or these trends need to be better? Amanda, if you want to start that off, and then Elaine, you can jump in.
I would say from a performance metrics standpoint, obviously traffic trends, and then cyclical growth. So for example, seasonality is a big component of most businesses, right? Like just that either Q4 or what, summer products might be, Q2, Q3 seasonality. And so when you're looking at the trends, you might see a drop off in the off months, but then growth in the seasonality. So you would want to look at, in that standpoint, you would want to look at year over year growth versus month over month growth. That's really important, versus a business that has really steady trends, just by and large across the entire year. You might look at like monthly growth trends, right? And so that's one performance metric I would say that's important. The other thing would be, as you mentioned, profit margins is important. Not just looking at revenue growth, but also profit growth over time. How has your ad spend increased or decreased? How has the product costs and shipping costs increased or decreased over time? Those are things that are really important because obviously, especially in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of those changes, right? Especially with shipping prices and container costs, that has affected cost of goods price overall. And are you able to increase the price and still keep that same conversion rate, which is also an important metric? Things like that are super important to monitor.
And Elaine, yeah,
I jump in and say, if you're just looking for some high level benchmarks, like I look for net profit above 15%. If your margins are really, really tight, that's hard because you just don't have the room to scale a business, to add on more staff, to increase the marketing as a buyer looking at that. And same thing with your gross margins. We like to see those 60% or higher. Again, it just indicates that you have room to scale from there.
That's great. And we had a question from someone in the chat. And so Anna, if you want to clarify a little bit, but the question was, how does this apply to service-based products? For example, an online Spanish service program, or it sounds like something that's not necessarily a tangible product. And I think by this, she might be referencing, or they might be referencing both the branding aspect, key metrics. Like, does any of that change when it's not like a tangible product in terms of, what buyers prioritize?
I would say no. In many cases, no. Obviously, a digital product doesn't have the cost of goods, attached to it because you have a digital product that actually already exists, and it, you might have to add on, just with upgrades with software and things like that. But with everything else being the same, it's really consistent in how brandable, how unique is the product based on defensibility against your customers. How are you marketing the business and how diversified is the traffic? How long are the customers staying with a service-based product like that? Buyers will certainly look at lifetime value, churn rate, recurring revenue, and how that is being maintained over time. Things like that might change a little bit, but those would be similar to consumable products as well. So you have some similarity and overlap with recurring revenue.
Great.
I agree with that.
Thank you so much for the question, Anna. And again, if you have any questions, whether it's in the group chat or in the Q&A chat box, please feel free to continue to enter those. We would be excited to answer them for you. You just mentioned something that I think maybe we can dive into a little bit in terms of repeat customers and how that having a loyal customer base can translate in your sale. Is that something that people should be worried about developing if they have a business that doesn't necessarily lend itself to repeat sales? Is that an issue? Maybe we can speak a little bit about that. Elaine, if you want to kick off and we'll go from there.
Yeah, there are several factors to consider there. I mean, not every business is going to lend itself to repeat purchases, but if you do have one, that's a great indicator of your service that you're providing, your product. It says, hey, we have something that people want. They're coming back and buying it more. That's a huge selling point. And I love to highlight that when we're listing a business for sale. But even if you don't have that, it's not like an end all be all, but you want to look more at what is the expansion opportunities with this category? Is there something else you can sell this customer base? Like, how do you build on what you're currently doing, maybe with the addition of some new products?
Amanda, if you have anything to jump in with too, we can dive into that.
Yeah, I would say along the lines of recurring revenue and repeat buyers, I think if you have a business that does lend itself to having repeat buyers and recurring revenue, I think it does absolutely increase the value of your business if you have a really strong percentage of recurring revenue, because it strengthens the foundation and scalability of your business. You don't have to spend as much to continually keep that a flow of revenue going, right? And also every new customer that you bring in is more likely to become a repeat customer. But on the flip side, if you have a business that has strong recurring revenue or repeat customers, and you start to see that deteriorate over time, that might be telling you something like that your business and your business quality or customer service or the products aren't performing as well. And so it's a great metric to be able to look at as a seller to say, what is going on here? So that might not be as evident when you have a business that doesn't have that repeat business and recurring revenue, because you don't really know, and you may not get as much feedback as you do with customers that are loyal over time. And if they start, falling off over time, then you have that ability to say, hey, there's something going on here, and you might be able to fix it a little bit faster.
And this might be getting into the nitty gritty, but in terms of managing that customer contact list or that contact base, is there a best practice for managing that? And in terms of when someone does go to transfer in the sale process, how should people be thinking about how they're, keeping track of their loyal customers or their repeat customers? And if either of you have thoughts on that.
I mean, it really depends on your business model. Reviews are a great way to gather feedback. Having really strong email marketing, and doesn't need to be really strong, just doing it. There's so many sellers that, have email lists and aren't leveraging those, but that is a really great way to get feedback, survey your customers. And just being really in touch with whoever is managing your customer service if you're not doing that, because those people that are on the front lines talking to your customers are hearing what people like and don't like about your product. So I think it's really important, especially as your business grows, that you're still really in tune with who your customers are and what they want, so that you know the best way to scale and serve them and improve your products going forward.
That's great. We have another question from a viewer. So I'll read this out to you guys. So let's say you're starting a business from scratch. Should you build it with the goal of selling it, as in the way you set it up from the beginning, even if you are not planning on selling it? Thinking about things like metrics, contact list, website, etc. So Amanda, if you want to kick that off.
I would say 100% yes. And the reason why is because all of the things that would be important in selling a business are going to be important in your day-to-day business regardless. These are best practices for managing your company, right? Things like, obviously, when you're setting up a business, you want to make sure that you're keeping your personal expenses separate from your business expenses to some degree, right? Obviously, it's not a huge problem to include like meals, entertainment, travel, insurance, and things like that, because you can write them off, but also we can add those back. But you don't want a completely commingled financial statement. So you can actually see from a month to month how profitable your business actually is. Also, setting up trademarks and things like that actually help your business from a protection standpoint, from being knocked off by the next competitor. So these are things that are really important in general, just to protect your business and brand. And that's why buyers like these things, just because they want them as well to protect their business. So I would say if you start doing it correctly as quickly as possible, so you don't have to backtrack, because that's when it becomes really hard.
Yeah, I feel like the type of financial statement question comes up quite a bit. So I think it's important that, even if you don't want to sell, for your own sanity and business best practice, to have all that lined up early on.
On that note, like if you're talking about financials and financial statements, if you have a business that has a product-based business inventory, if you will, accrual accounting is really important if you're going to sell it. But it's also important for a business owner to know how profitable their business is in a given month, because that helps them keep an eye on performance metrics. So cash-based accounting is great for taxes, and it's simple because as an expense comes in, it just hits the accountant. The accountant can put it into the QuickBooks or whatever software that they're using. But it's not a great way to track the actual month over month and year over year growth profitability of the company, because when you're buying inventory in a given month, it might change one month to the next. And so you can't actually really see how profitable the business is that month if you're doing it on a cash-based accounting method. And then from a software as a service type business, the digital business that Anna had mentioned, accrual accounting can be really important in that aspect as well, for the same reasons, because if you don't have monthly subscribers, if you have annual subscribers, it can be really hard to see your overall trends and growth, because you might have seasonality where all of your customers are signing up in January, February, and March, versus the rest of the months where it's kind of dry. So accrual accounting actually spreads that out over the year, so you can see the growth trends a little bit better.
Great. Elaine, if you had anything to jump in, I didn't want to cut you off. But one question I have for you guys too is, and you kind of have talked a lot about growth. How important is it to leave some growth opportunities untapped, untouched, or is it something you shouldn't do? I guess leaving some room for scalability, like how should people think about that? Because obviously you want to grow as much as possible and have the highest value you can, but curious how that sort of plays into the selling process. And Elaine, if you want to jump in, or Amanda, either way.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I recommend business owners do is just to keep track of all the growth opportunities that you see. So keep a list of that. As more ideas come to you, write them down, and have anything that you can think of, expanding to this country, launching this new product segment, like any kind of feedback you get, any ideas you have, write them down and categorize them for yourself. Like, what are the opportunities that make sense for me to do as the owner of this business? Like, what resources do I have? Where do I think I can best grow it from that list? But keep that list on hand, because when you go to sell, that's something that we will present. You want to make sure that you have still room to grow when you sell. If you have already grown it to the capacity that you don't see any potential room to continue expanding, that's going to be hard to sell, because the buyers that are looking for this are looking to grow it, and they don't want to look at and buy something that has already kind of maxed out and there's no more market share or no more room there. So keeping track of those opportunities, regardless of how small, makes it really easy to present those opportunities when it comes time to sell, and show that there is still room to take this to the next level. And you never know what somebody else might connect with. Somebody might just have like perfect connections for one of the opportunities that you listed that you just didn't think was that important for whatever reason. Everyone has their own experience and value that they can bring.
That's great. Amanda, if you have anything to add too, I don't want to cut you off.
Sure. No, I think Elaine touched on all the important aspects of why having a room for growth is important. And I think it's important to mention why as well, because if you're thinking about from a valuation perspective, right, we apply a multiple to a business, but that when a buyer is looking at that multiple, they want to actually decrease the time it takes to get the return on investment. And the only way to truly do that is through growth, and not only decrease the time it takes to get that return on investment, but also to increase value, right? So those are two important things that buyers are looking for when they're looking to buy a business. How fast can they get their money back? And then how quickly can they increase the value of the company? And so that's why it's important to have some room for growth. Oftentimes, you may not see all the aspects of growth that are on the table because you're so in the business, as you're like in the business versus working on the business. And I think that's why it's important to consult with advisors, just because they may see other opportunities that you don't. One thing I like to do in my initial valuation calls is talk about those opportunities and things that I see that the seller may not see, just so they can get their wheels turning and thinking about those opportunities as they continue to scale their business and getting ready for a sale.
And I think you brought up a great point that it's just helpful to have that second set of eyes. I think sometimes we get this question a lot of like, why work with an advisor when you could not? And really, it's just that there could be opportunity left on the table. There could be value left on the table that you wouldn't even know if you didn't have a second person just reviewing your materials. So I think that's an awesome point. We have another question from a viewer. So I'll read that to you now. How are buyers changing in today's economy? Are they prioritizing the same things or waiting, etc.? Thank you so much. And for all the questions that have been coming through, thank you guys so much. Please, we have about 20 minutes left, so plenty of time for more questions. And thank you for those that have submitted so far. And that the latest question. So Amanda, if you want to kick that one off. I think it's sort of similar to the question we had earlier, but I think more focused on, the elephant in the room, which is the recession, maybe recession that's coming down, that's happening right now. So anyway, I'll leave you to discuss that. Yeah,
we're obviously seeing some changes in the market, right? And with that comes, just the buyers are actually that we're seeing come to look to, at these opportunities are obviously looking at businesses that are sustainable through tight markets, right? So that's one thing that buyers are looking at is this business able to continue growing through a market that's contracting? And so that's one thing. Buyers are still very active. So that's not really changing. I don't think that we're going to the summertime. So you do see just a general slowdown with buyers in the summer in any given market. So that's normal. I think what we're seeing as a overview of buyers is that they're likely to want to pay a lower price than we may have, witnessed in the end of 2021. And so you do see the multiples coming down a bit. And I don't know where the market is going in the future, but right now we are seeing a little bit of tightening on that end.
Elaine, if you have anything as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'd echo what Amanda said. Like, we're seeing a tightening, but there's definitely still a lot of buyer activity. There's still a lot of buyers looking. People are asking me, hey, Elaine, is now the time that I can get a deal? And, we're seeing multiples drop a little bit, but I think it's most affecting businesses that are perceived as a little bit riskier. So something that has some kind of contingency or maybe something newer, there's many reasons why a business can be perceived as a little bit more risky. Those are becoming a little harder to sell and getting less buyer interest, whereas really strong businesses that have good foundations, they're still attracting a lot of buyers.
So there's still hope for everyone involved is what I'm hearing. No one should be too scared of what's happening. People are still looking to buy and to sell, which is good news. And I think something that it's important to reiterate, this came up in our last webinar as well. So thank you for that question. And if you have any other questions, again, we have about 20 minutes left, so please feel free to jump in. Oh, we have a question in the chat box here. Great timing. What would you say is an ideal percentage profit one should aim for on the sale of their business, or what is the ideal equation? So Amanda, if you want to kick that one off.
I think it depends on the business model, right? So software as a service businesses are going to have a different profit margin than an inventory-based business, right? And so in looking at inventory-based businesses, I think it's important to shoot for over 15%, as Elaine mentioned, and that really just depends on where your traffic's coming from. For example, Amazon businesses can have tighter margins just because there's the fees that go along with selling on Amazon, or if you have traffic coming from pay-per-click or anything like that, they can have tighter margins. But on the flip side, with a software as a service or a digital service product, you're going to have higher margins. So a buyer may expect a much higher percentage there on that end.
Great. Elaine, if you have anything to add, feel free.
I would agree with what Amanda said there.
Great. Thank you so much, Anna, for the question. You are very welcome. And again, whether in the chat box or the Q&A, doesn't really matter. Either way, we'll get your questions answered. So keep them coming. In the meantime, I have a question for you. We've talked a lot about some of the more, tangible, hard aspects of a business that buyers are interested in. But in terms of some of the more softer side for a seller's demeanor, I think a lot of people think about these transactions as being very transactional, but it sounds like it's actually a little bit more of a relationship than it is just, here's the deal and we're done and we'll sign on the dotted line. So if you guys could speak a little bit to that process and sort of the more, emotional relationship aspect of the selling process. Elaine, if you want to kick that one off, and I'll let you get from there.
Yeah, mindset is so important when you're looking to sell or buy a business. It really does have to be a fit on a relationship level. Like, of course, it has to be a right fit at the business, has to be, it has to make sense sales wise, but this process is so much easier when the buyer and seller have a good relationship. And that starts with approaching it with the right mindset. So that is being really open-minded. As a seller, you're going to get asked a lot of questions. You might get asked multiple questions, and, having some patience with the process and trying not to, really just trying to have an open mind, because it can take some time. There's twists and turns that come up. There's nothing that's really guaranteed till the end of the sale. So, it can be difficult. You've worked so hard to build this business. You probably put your heart and soul and so much effort into it. That it can be very emotional, but trying to really be as easygoing as you can about it and trying not to get too invested until the deal is done is going to be the best thing to kind of save you some emotional heartache through the process, because things really do happen and change.
Yeah, and Amanda, if you have anything else to jump in with.
Yeah, from the aspect that Elaine mentioned, this is a very emotional process for most sellers, just because you've put so much time and invested so much energy into building this business and you want to get the most out of it. But one thing I tell all of my sellers and all of the buyers that we work with is that most things are workoutable. So you're going to come up against hurdles in this process, regardless of the best laid intentions and planning, right? There are things that are going to come up. And if you come to this process with an open mind, as Elaine mentioned, that we can actually figure this out as a team, then it's going to make it much more seamless and just less stressful overall. A lot of times those things come up literally the day before a sale, right? So it just happens, and just knowing and expecting that there's going to be something that's going to come up. We're going to figure it out unless it's catastrophic, right? But at the end of the day, just knowing that it's normal to have these things pop up, and we can work through them as a team with the buyer. is a great mindset, and it just helps alleviate some of that overall roller coaster ups and the ups and downs of the process.
Because the reality is, just because the sale is over doesn't mean your interaction with your buyer is over. And so I imagine that it's pretty important to have that good relationship, really for everyone's sake, so that the transfer process is pretty smooth. Have you guys have any, personal experience or entrepreneurs you've worked with where, that part of the relationship wasn't working, and how you maybe fixed it or had to work on it? Or maybe it was just that this is just not the right buyer, like we're not a great fit, regardless of the numbers. I don't know if either of you have any specific examples or anecdotes you can share. I'll let you think for a second on it. And while you do, again, if you have about 10 minutes left or so if you have any final questions, please feel free to submit them either in the group chat or in the Q&A chat box at the bottom.
To speak to that, I would say I've been doing this for 11 years with Quiet Light, right? So certainly I've run into instances where it's not always just the seller. It can be the seller can have an open mind, but the buyer may not, right? And there's a lot of fears on the buyer side. Having the empathy and compassion for the buyer, that this is a risk that they're taking on, is really important. And so if a seller doesn't have the ability to see the fear that buyers will have, that can be really hard to navigate, right? So being able to bridge that gap is something that I find really important in my role in advising clients. And so I usually do try to set those expectations early in the process and saying, hey, we are working together as a team, and we're trying to make sure that the buyer feels comfortable with making sure the sale is something that they really want to do. And certainly we've had deals fall apart where that didn't work out, right? That relationship wasn't quite there. So, it does happen from time to time, but we do also have waiting lists, right? For buyers that are really hungry for the business. And that's why we do that. So we do keep backups. But one of the things that I do look for when we have multiple buyers that are making offers is that relationship basis. And so if a buyer and seller are really vibing, then I do highlight that to a seller, because that will make the process much more seamless.
That's great. Elaine, if you have any examples or anecdotes to share as well.
Yeah, those are great points. And I don't have a specific example of this, but just something to clarify in terms of your mindset as a seller is really that, like Amanda said, the buyer is taking on this huge risk. As a seller, you want to make sure that you're setting up the buyer for success. Like, you want to be as helpful as you can in the process. And we'll, as your advisor, we'll help you in terms of how to do that and what information you need to have ready. But you need to come to it with the mindset that you're offering this opportunity to the buyer, but you need to help them, and you have the information that they don't, and you want them to be successful. You want to see what you made grow and live on. I mean, that's such a rewarding position to be in, and approaching it with that is really will give the buyer confidence as well that this is something that they're able to succeed with.
That's great. Yeah, I can only imagine it's not as it's much more personable than I think a lot of people necessarily think about when they come into a process like this. And having advisors or, just someone to be able to lean on and help that negotiation and that relationship develop is super important.
Yep. I would say it's not just a transaction. This is building a relationship. You're building that rapport with whoever is going to buy the business.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a logistical question to ask you guys, just in our last few minutes. Can you speak a little on the SBA pre-qualification process, whether that's something sellers should consider? If so, when? Like, why does it help a business to have that SBA pre-qualification? Amanda, if you want to kick that one off.
Yeah, so the SBA process is something that we will handle on our side as far as like preparing a business, and whether or not it qualifies is something that we'll know pretty quickly. And we have certain lenders that we work with that we know can pre-qualify these really quickly, and they know exactly what needs to be in place to get those type of deals done. when a business qualifies for SBA financing, it opens up the buyer pool substantially. So thinking about, a buyer that's looking for something in, for example, they want to spend about $300,000. If they only have $300,000 to spend on the business, then, if the business qualifies for SBA financing, they might be able to buy a business up to $1 to $1.5 million, right? So all of a sudden that what they can afford actually expands greatly. And so there's a lot more buyers that can look at the business when it's SBA pre-qualified. So that's one thing. The other thing is buyers have a perceived risk for all businesses, right? But when they're SBA pre-qualified, it makes the business feel like it's been vetted and a little bit more secure, just because the banks do have certain standards that a business has to, or criteria that it has to have, including, 3 years of history and tax returns. It has to have certain metrics as far as like whether it's profit margins and things like that have to be in place for banks. And as far as like structure and model, they also have criteria. So that helps buyers feel more comfortable as well.
Elaine, if you have anything to add to that too, feel free.
Yeah, and I mean, just the increase in the number of buyers interested is going to bring up the price of your business most likely, because that's going to drive the competition. I think our average listing these days is getting around 4 offers, and the more offers you have, the better price you're going to get. So at the end of the day, whether or not you end up moving forward with an SBA buyer or not, it's going to be well worth your while to go through that process and get qualified.
We just got another question in the Q&A chat box, so thank you so much. Any advice for a non-US company with substantial revenue, 70% in the US, considering selling to a buyer in the US? And I'll let either of you take that. Thank you so much for the question. Just in time, we still have a couple more minutes if there's anything else that comes up from anyone. But I'll leave it to you. I don't, Elaine, if you want to jump in.
Yeah. We work with a lot of international sellers. That's not a huge deal. I think that the biggest thing when we're working with an international business is making sure that the communication piece is there. So if you speak English, that's already a huge plus. There are some challenges that come along with that. For instance, we're just talking about SBA pre-qualification. If it's international business, it's not going to qualify for that. But the fact that it is selling a lot in the US is a good sign. It gets challenging if the language of business is something other than English, because our buyer pool is primarily English speaking. But that's definitely something that if you're interested, we'd love to hop on a call with you and learn more about your business and give a little bit more insights for the valuation in your particular situation.
And I think it's important just to add, we were just talking about relationships, and this is one of the areas where relationships is really important, and being willing to go the extra step in making sure a buyer is more comfortable, because there are non-competes that come into play in all of these deals, right? So when there's an international based seller, that non-compete then becomes a little bit less or a lot less effective, right? So then you really have to instill trust with the buyer. And so that's where that becomes exceptionally important.
And we'll share at the end how you guys can reach out to these two specifically, and then Quiet Light broadly. I want to get to one more question that just came through in the Q&A chat box as well. If you have a business that has been negatively impacted during the past few years due to COVID or hurricanes, would it be better to start a brand new business from scratch when it comes to the financials and then aim to sell 3 years down the line? Or not, I guess. So thank you so much for that question. And if either of you want to jump in on that one.
Yeah, I would say that as far as it, honestly, it just depends, right? So like that's a very generalized question. So, how hard has it been impacted and why has it been impacted? Is it not something that you can just build back up with all the foundational tools that you've already built into the business? Or have you been negatively affected by, Amazon restrictions or, any penalties? If so, then maybe. But if not, if you still have the foundation for the business, then perhaps it makes sense to just look at how you're marketing the business and maybe recalibrate, who you're targeting and building off of that. If you need, like, as far as like selling and valuations and things like that with a distressed business, those businesses are still very sellable. We have advisors that are really good at selling distressed businesses, and you just won't perhaps get as much as you would if the business was growing and super strong, but it's still a viable asset in most cases to get some return on investment for your time in building that brand versus just starting over and throwing everything away.
And Elaine, if you have anything to jump in with,
I mean, a turnaround story is awesome if the opportunity is there to make it happen. Like Amanda says, it really just depends on the situation. What exact things have been impacted? Can you come up from this, or is your time better spent working on something else? But definitely, if you can turn it around, and that just shows that the business can weather storms and is resilient. If you can grow that and get it to a really profitable place, that's awesome. But again, if you're ready to be done, it's worth having a conversation as well, because it still could be sellable potentially where it is.
And I think that's a really important piece that also comes into this process is the storytelling. It's like the numbers are one thing, but there's a whole other aspect to the marketing materials that someone like an advisor at Quiet Light would put together. That sort of tells the entire story of your brand. It's not just like, here's a number. If you like it, great. And if not, oh well. So thank you so much for that question. And thank you all for joining us today. If you would like to reach out to either Amanda or Elaine, I've added their email addresses. If you hover over their boxes, you can see it's Elaine@quietlight.com and Amanda@quietlight.com. So very straightforward, hard to miss. But thank you all for joining and for all of the awesome questions. We'll be sending out this recording to everyone that registered in about a week. So you'll be able to rewatch it. And if you have any questions after that, please feel free to reach out to us again, to either Amanda and Elaine specifically or at inquiries@quietlight.com. And we would love to hear from you guys. If you have any final remarks, Elaine and Amanda, Elaine, I'll start with you. Feel free.
No, thank you so much for having us, Sam. I think we've covered a lot of really great topics. So appreciate you for organizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Amanda, for joining.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for joining. And if you have any questions, we're always happy to help, whether it be jumping on a call or through email.
Great. Well, thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll catch you at next month's webinar.